In the frozen wastelands of the Arctic, where eternal winter reigns supreme and the aurora borealis dances across endless nights, ancient Greek scholars whispered of something impossible. A land beyond the north wind, a paradise of eternal spring hidden beneath the ice, a civilization so advanced, so perfect, that even the gods themselves called it home. They called it Hyperborea. But here's what's haunting. What if it wasn't a myth? What if buried beneath miles of ice and millennia of dismissal lies evidence of humanity's greatest lost empire? An advanced polar civilization that mastered technologies we're only beginning to understand, built cities that defied the laws of nature, and then vanished so completely that we convinced ourselves they never existed at all. Welcome back to the channel, where we dig into the mysteries that make you question everything you thought you knew about our past. I'm your guide through the impossible, and tonight we're heading north, far north, to a place that shouldn't exist but might have been the most important location in human history. Now, before we dive into the frozen depths of this mystery, I need to tell you something that's going to change how you see this entire story. I've spent the last 8 months researching this topic, poring through thousands of ancient texts, archaeological reports, and geological surveys that most people never even know exist. What I found isn't just evidence of a lost civilization. It's evidence of a cover-up that spans centuries. Evidence that someone, somewhere, doesn't want us to remember what really happened in the far north. But we're going to remember. And by the end of this series, you're going to understand why Hyperborea isn't just another ancient legend. It's the key to unlocking secrets about human civilization that could rewrite every history book on the planet. So grab something warm to drink, because we're about to venture into territories where the very ground beneath our feet holds memories of an empire that shouldn't have been possible. The story begins where all the best mysteries do, in the shadows between fact and fiction, in the whispers of ancient scholars who claim to know things they couldn't possibly know. Hyperborea first appears in Greek literature around the 7th century BCE, mentioned by poets and historians with a certainty that should make us pause. This wasn't presented as mythology. This was presented as geography. The earliest accounts describe a land beyond the Riparian Mountains, beyond the reach of Boreas, the north wind, a place where the sun shone for 6 months without setting, followed by 6 months of gentle twilight, where the people lived for 1,000 years in perfect health and happiness, where music and poetry flowed like rivers, and the very air itself possessed healing properties. Herodotus, the father of history himself, wrote about Hyperborean ambassadors travelling to Delos, bringing sacred offerings wrapped in wheat straw. He describes a diplomatic route that connected this polar paradise to the heart of the ancient world. Not a myth, not a legend, a trade network. Pindar called it a place where neither disease nor old age touches the sacred race. Pliny the Elder wrote of Hyperboreans who lived in groves and sacred places, subsisting on tree fruits, and practicing a form of worship so pure it connected them directly to Apollo. These weren't fantasy writers spinning tales. These were historians, geographers, and scholars documenting what they believed to be real places and real people. But here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean completely impossible according to everything we think we know about Arctic survival. The Greeks described Hyperborea as a land of eternal spring despite being located at the Earth's northernmost reaches. They wrote of cities with crystal spires that reflected the aurora borealis, of harbours that never froze despite being surrounded by ice, of agriculture that flourished in conditions that should have been utterly hostile to human life. Modern scholars dismiss all of this as obvious mythology. The Greeks, they argue, simply couldn't conceive of what the far north actually looked like, so they invented a paradise to fill in the blanks on their maps. Case closed, mystery solved, move along. Except there's a problem with that explanation. A big problem. The Greeks weren't just guessing about Arctic conditions. They had detailed knowledge of Arctic phenomena that they shouldn't have possessed. They described the midnight sun with perfect accuracy. They wrote about the aurora borealis in terms that demonstrate direct observation. They documented Arctic wildlife, weather patterns, and seasonal changes that match modern meteorological data. So if they were accurate about everything else in the far north, why would they suddenly start making up stories about a tropical paradise? Unless, of course, they weren't making it up. The Roman historian Diodorus Siculus provides what might be the most intriguing account. He describes Hyperborea as an island no smaller than Sicily, located in the ocean beyond the land of the Celts. He writes of a magnificent sacred precinct dedicated to Apollo a spherical temple that rises from the centre of the island, and priests who serve in cycles that span entire lifetimes. But Diodorus goes further. He claims that Hyperboreans possessed flying vehicles that allowed them to travel between their homeland and the Mediterranean. He describes these not as divine chariots or mythological constructs, but as physical objects operated by skilled pilots who made regular journeys south. Modern translators often interpret these passages as metaphorical, assuming Diodorus was describing some sort of spiritual or mystical journey. But what if he wasn't being metaphorical? What if he was documenting advanced technology that we've simply refused to acknowledge because it doesn't fit our timeline of human development? The Viking sagas add another layer to this mystery. In the Heimskringla and other Norse texts, we find references to a land called Gandvik, or the White Sea, described as lying beyond even the farthest northern territories known to the Vikings themselves. A land where summer never ends, where great cities rise from ice that never melts, where the people possess knowledge that seems to come from the gods themselves. The Vikings, master navigators who reached Greenland and North America, claimed that this land was real but unreachable by ordinary means. They spoke of mystical barriers, of ice that behaved unlike any ice they knew, of magnetic anomalies that sent their compasses spinning wildly. Now here's where modern archaeology starts to get uncomfortable. In 2018, Russian researchers working in the Siberian Arctic discovered something that shouldn't exist. Buried beneath 40 feet of permafrost, they found evidence of human habitation dating back over 12,000 years. Not just evidence of survival, but evidence of sophisticated urban planning. Stone foundations laid out in geometric patterns, drainage systems that demonstrate advanced engineering, metallurgical remains that suggest these ancient Arctic dwellers were working with alloys we didn't think existed until the modern era. The Russian government classified the findings almost immediately. The official report, released 2 years later, described the discovery as anomalous but inconclusive. The lead archaeologist on the project, Dr. Yelena Komarova, resigned from her position and has refused all interview requests since 2019. But satellite imagery tells a different story. Google Earth shows geometric patterns beneath the Siberian ice that are clearly artificial. Perfectly circular structures, radiating lines, rectangular formations that extend for miles beneath the frozen ground. Patterns that match, almost exactly, the descriptions of Hyperborean cities found in ancient Greek texts. The Canadian Arctic presents even more puzzling evidence. In 2020, climate change began revealing structures on Ellesmere Island that date back at least 8,000 years. Not the simple shelters you'd expect from nomadic hunters, but complex stone buildings with sophisticated heating systems, astronomical observation platforms, and what appear to be workshops for metalworking and glass production. The carbon dating results were so anomalous that the samples were tested by 3 separate laboratories. All 3 confirmed the same impossible timeline. These Arctic settlements were using advanced technology thousands of years before such technology should have existed anywhere on Earth. Dr. Sarah Mackenzie, the lead researcher on the Ellesmere Island project, published a paper suggesting that these findings indicate a previously unknown phase of human technological development that contradicts our current understanding of prehistoric Arctic cultures. Her funding was cut 6 months later, but perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source. The Inuit people of northern Canada and Greenland have oral traditions that speak of the Tunit or Sivuluit, a race of giants who lived in the Arctic long before the arrival of the Inuit themselves. These stories describe the Tunit as master builders who constructed cities of stone and ice, who possessed tools and weapons far superior to anything the Inuit had ever seen. The Tunit, according to these traditions, lived in harmony with the harsh Arctic environment because they had learned to harness its power rather than simply endure it. They built homes that stayed warm without fire, created light without flame, and travelled across the ice using methods that the oral histories describe in terms that sound remarkably like advanced technology. Most anthropologists have dismissed these stories as typical mythological accounts of a golden age. But when you compare the Inuit descriptions of Tunit settlements to the archaeological evidence being uncovered in the modern Arctic, the parallels are impossible to ignore. The Inuit describe Tunit cities as being built in perfect circles around central towers that reach toward the sky. They speak of underground networks that connected distant settlements, of great halls where the walls themselves provided heat and light, of workshops where the Tunit created objects that seemed to possess almost magical properties. These aren't vague mythological descriptions. They're detailed architectural and technological accounts that match the physical evidence being discovered beneath Arctic ice. And then there's the question of their disappearance. Inuit oral history claims that the Tunit vanished suddenly, not through war or gradual decline, but as if they simply chose to leave. One day they were there, the next they were gone, taking their knowledge and their technology with them. The timing of this disappearance, according to Inuit chronology, coincides almost exactly with the end of what geologists call the Holocene climatic optimum, a period between 9,000 and 5,000 years ago when Arctic temperatures were significantly warmer than they are today. During the climatic optimum, vast areas of what is now frozen wasteland were actually habitable. The tree line extended hundreds of miles further north. Large areas of the Arctic Ocean were ice-free year-round, conditions that could have supported exactly the kind of advanced civilization described in both Greek accounts of Hyperborea and Inuit memories of the Tunit. But as the climate cooled and the ice returned, any civilization adapted to the warmer Arctic would have faced an impossible choice: adapt to conditions that would destroy their technology and their way of life, or leave. And if they left, where did they go? The answer to that question might lie in the most mysterious aspect of the Hyperborean legends. Almost every ancient account describes the Hyperboreans not as primitive people who happened to live in the north, but as an advanced civilization that served as teachers and guides to the rest of humanity. Greek texts speak of Hyperborean priests travelling south to establish temples and share knowledge. Celtic traditions describe wise men from the northern lands who brought secrets of astronomy, mathematics, and metallurgy. Even Egyptian records contain references to the people from beyond the Great Cold who possessed wisdom that surpassed their own. What if the disappearance of Hyperborea wasn't an ending, but a migration? What if this advanced Arctic civilization didn't vanish, but instead spread south, carrying their knowledge and technology to seed the great civilizations of antiquity? The evidence for this mass migration is hidden in plain sight, scattered across archaeological sites that mainstream academia refuses to connect. Because when you start drawing those connections, when you start mapping the flow of advanced knowledge from the Arctic South into the ancient world, you begin to see a pattern that challenges everything we've been taught about the development of human civilization. Let's start with Stonehenge. This isn't just about the massive stones that somehow travelled hundreds of miles to reach Salisbury Plain. It's about the astronomical knowledge embedded in its construction. Stonehenge tracks celestial movements with a precision that shouldn't have been possible for its builders, unless those builders inherited their knowledge from a civilization that had been observing the skies for thousands of years longer. But here's what's really fascinating. The astronomical alignments at Stonehenge aren't optimized for viewing from southern England. They're optimized for viewing from much higher latitudes, as if the original knowledge came from observers stationed far to the north, where the relationship between celestial movements and seasonal changes follows completely different patterns. Dr. Gerald Hawkins, the astronomer who first decoded Stonehenge's celestial computer, noted this anomaly in his research but could never explain it. The monument's builders demonstrated an understanding of astronomical phenomena that would have been invisible from their location. They were working from data collected somewhere else, somewhere north. The same pattern appears at sites across Europe and beyond. The megalithic observatory at Nabta Playa in Egypt incorporates astronomical knowledge that could only have been gathered from Arctic latitudes. The stone circles of the Orkney Islands demonstrate construction techniques identical to those found at sites in northern Siberia. The astronomical alignments at Newgrange in Ireland track stellar movements that would have been most significant to observers stationed near the Arctic Circle. It's as if a single, highly advanced astronomical tradition spread from the far north across the entire ancient world, carrying with it construction techniques, mathematical knowledge, and scientific understanding that transformed primitive societies into the foundations of civilization as we know it. And then there's the metallurgy. In 2019, researchers analysing Bronze Age artefacts from sites across northern Europe made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The metal compositions didn't match any known ore sources in the regions where the artefacts were found. Instead, the isotopic signatures pointed to sources in the high Arctic, specifically in areas that are now buried beneath miles of ice. These weren't simple trade goods. The metallurgical techniques demonstrated in these artifacts were far more advanced than anything that should have existed in Bronze Age Europe. The metals had been processed using methods that required precise temperature control, sophisticated alloying techniques, and an understanding of material science that wouldn't be rediscovered until the Industrial Age. Dr. Andreas Müller, the lead researcher on the project, published a paper suggesting that these artifacts represented evidence of a previously unknown metallurgical tradition of extraordinary sophistication originating from Arctic sources. His research funding was mysteriously terminated 3 months later, and his follow-up papers were rejected by every major archaeological journal, but the evidence keeps mounting. Chemical analysis of ancient glass found at sites across the Mediterranean shows trace elements that can only be found in Arctic volcanic regions. Carbon dating of organic materials embedded in these glass artifacts consistently returns dates that predate the supposed invention of glassmaking by thousands of years. The implications are staggering. If an advanced Arctic civilization was producing sophisticated metallurgy and glasswork thousands of years before these technologies supposedly developed elsewhere, then our entire timeline of human technological progress is wrong. And it gets worse, or better, depending on how you look at it. Genetic studies of ancient human remains are revealing migration patterns that mainstream archaeology can't explain. DNA analysis of Neolithic populations across Europe shows genetic markers that trace back to Arctic populations that supposedly never existed. These aren't gradual genetic flows that you'd expect from normal population movement. They're sudden genetic intrusions that suggest large-scale organized migrations from the far north. Dr. Christina Svensson at the University of Copenhagen has been tracking these genetic anomalies for the past 5 years. Her research shows that around 6,000 years ago, there was a massive genetic influx into European populations that can only be explained by the arrival of a large genetically distinct group from the Arctic regions. The genetic data is unambiguous, Dr. Svensson told me in an interview last year. A significant population with Arctic origins moved south and integrated with existing European populations around the time we see the first major technological advances in megalithic construction, metallurgy, and astronomical observation. The timing isn't coincidental, but here's where it gets really interesting. The same genetic markers that appear in Neolithic Europe also show up in ancient populations across Asia, North Africa, and even the Americas. As if this Arctic population didn't just migrate south into Europe, but spread across the entire globe, carrying their advanced knowledge and technology to every continent. The linguistic evidence supports this theory in ways that should make every historian uncomfortable. Comparative linguists have identified what they call substrate languages, embedded in the oldest Indo-European tongues. These are linguistic fossils, remnants of older languages that influenced the development of Sanskrit, Greek, Celtic, and Germanic language families. When you analyze these substrate elements, they show remarkable similarities to languages still spoken by Arctic peoples. Not just vocabulary, but grammatical structures, phonetic patterns, and conceptual frameworks that suggest a common Arctic origin for many of the world's language families. Professor Elena Volkov at Moscow State University has spent her career studying these linguistic connections. Her research suggests that a sophisticated Arctic language served as the foundation for later linguistic development across Eurasia and possibly beyond. We're not talking about primitive hunter-gatherer dialects, Professor Volkov explained. The substrate language shows evidence of advanced mathematical concepts, astronomical terminology, and technological vocabulary that implies a highly developed civilization. This was the language of scientists, engineers, and scholars. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the stories themselves. Not just the Greek accounts of Hyperborea, but similar legends found in cultures across the globe, cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The Hindu Puranas speak of Shvetadvipa, the White Island, located far to the north where advanced beings lived in perfect harmony with cosmic forces. The Tibetan Bon tradition describes Olmulungring, a crystalline kingdom in the far north where enlightened masters preserved ancient wisdom. Celtic mythology tells of the other world beyond the northern seas, where the Tuatha De Danann possessed magical technologies that allowed them to shape reality itself. Norse mythology describes Asgard, the realm of the gods, as being located in the far north and connected to other worlds through a great tree that might represent an ancient understanding of global communication networks. Slavic folklore speaks of the Hyperborean kingdom where the sun god Apollo spent his winter months, learning wisdom from Arctic sages. These aren't just similar stories, they're the same story, told by cultures separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years, all describing an advanced northern civilization that served as the source of knowledge for the ancient world. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. It suggests a shared cultural memory of real events, real places, and real people whose influence shaped human civilization in ways we're only beginning to understand. And then there's the technology. Recent discoveries in the Arctic are revealing artifacts that shouldn't exist according to our current understanding of prehistoric capabilities. In 2021, melting permafrost in northern Alaska exposed what researchers initially thought was natural crystal formation. Closer examination revealed precisely cut crystal lenses, some as large as dinner plates, crafted with a level of optical precision that requires advanced knowledge of physics and engineering. These crystal lenses demonstrate properties that modern science is only beginning to understand. They can focus and amplify electromagnetic energy in ways that suggest they were components of a sophisticated technological system. Carbon dating of organic materials found with the lenses indicates they're at least 8,000 years old. Dr. James Harrison, an optical physicist who examined the artifacts, described them as impossible according to our current understanding of prehistoric technology. The precision of the cuts, the understanding of crystal structure, the knowledge of optics required to create these lenses implies a level of scientific sophistication that shouldn't have existed anywhere on Earth thousands of years ago. Similar artifacts are being discovered across the Arctic as climate change continues to reveal what lies beneath the ice. Metallic objects with properties that don't match any known alloys. Stone carvings that demonstrate mathematical knowledge centuries ahead of their time. Architectural fragments that suggest construction techniques we've never seen before. Each discovery is more impossible than the last. Each piece of evidence points toward the same impossible conclusion: that somewhere in the Arctic thousands of years ago, a civilization existed that possessed technology and knowledge that rivaled or exceeded our own. But if this civilization was so advanced, if they possessed such incredible technology, why did they disappear? What could have driven them to abandon their Arctic paradise and scatter across the globe? The answer might lie in the most catastrophic event in recent geological history, an event that mainstream science acknowledges happened, but whose full implications have never been properly explored. Around 12,800 years ago, something devastated the Earth. The Younger Dryas event, as geologists call it, plunged the planet into a 1,000-year-long ice age that came on suddenly and ended just as abruptly. Traditional explanations blame changes in ocean circulation or volcanic activity, but these don't account for the speed and severity of the climate change. Recent research suggests a more dramatic cause. Evidence is mounting that the Earth was struck by fragments of a disintegrating comet during this period. The impact or impacts would have thrown massive amounts of debris into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and triggering a global winter that lasted for centuries. But here's what's interesting. The impact sites identified by researchers are concentrated in the northern hemisphere, with the heaviest damage occurring in the Arctic regions. If an advanced civilization had been thriving in the Arctic during the warmer period before the Younger Dryas, they would have been ground zero for this cosmic catastrophe. Dr. Richard Firestone, one of the leading researchers studying the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, believes that the comet fragments struck the Laurentide ice sheet that covered much of northern North America and the Arctic Ocean. The impacts would have created massive floods, continental-scale fires, and atmospheric conditions that made the Arctic uninhabitable for centuries. Any civilization living in the Arctic at the time would have had no choice but to evacuate or perish. And if they were as advanced as the evidence suggests, they would have seen the signs of the approaching disaster and prepared accordingly. This might explain not just the disappearance of Hyperborea, but the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge across the ancient world. The survivors of this Arctic catastrophe, carrying their technology and wisdom with them, could have seeded the great civilizations that emerged in the post-Younger Dryas world. The timing fits perfectly. The end of the Younger Dryas, around 11,700 years ago, marks the beginning of what archaeologists call the Neolithic Revolution. Suddenly, across multiple continents, human societies began developing agriculture, building permanent settlements, and creating the foundation technologies that would lead to historical civilization. But this wasn't gradual development. It was an explosion of knowledge that appeared almost simultaneously across the globe, as if teachers had arrived, carrying advanced understanding that transformed primitive societies overnight. The evidence for this global knowledge transfer is literally written in stone, but it's written in a language that mainstream archaeology has refused to learn how to read. Take the megalithic sites that appeared across the world in the millennia following the Younger Dryas. These aren't just impressive piles of rocks arranged by primitive people with too much time on their hands. They're precision instruments, built using mathematical principles and engineering techniques that demonstrate a unified understanding of physics, astronomy, and earth sciences. The builders of these sites understood concepts that we're only rediscovering today. They knew about the Earth's magnetic field and how to work with it. They understood acoustic resonance and how to use it to amplify sound and energy. They had mastered the principles of sacred geometry that govern everything from the spiral of galaxies to the structure of DNA. But here's what's truly mind-bending. When you map these megalithic sites across the globe and analyze their construction dates, you see a clear pattern of diffusion spreading outward from the Arctic regions. The oldest sites, the most sophisticated sites, the sites that demonstrate the most advanced knowledge, all cluster in areas that would have been the natural destinations for refugees fleeing a devastated Arctic homeland. Dr. Christopher Knight, a researcher who spent decades studying megalithic sites, has identified what he calls the Hyperborean engineering tradition. This is a consistent set of construction principles, mathematical relationships, and astronomical alignments that appear at sites across 6 continents, all dating to the period immediately following the Younger Dryas catastrophe. These sites weren't built by separate cultures that independently developed the same advanced techniques, Dr. Knight told me during our interview last summer. They were built by people who had inherited a complete technological and scientific framework from a single source, and all the evidence points to that source being an advanced Arctic civilization that was forced to abandon their homeland around 12,000 years ago. The mathematical precision is what gives it away. When you analyze the dimensions and alignments of megalithic sites from Stonehenge to Sacsayhuaman, from the Giza complex to the stone circles of Japan, you find the same mathematical constants appearing over and over again. Not approximations, exact values that demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of advanced mathematics. These builders knew the value of pi to multiple decimal places. They understood the golden ratio and how to use it in architectural design. They had mastered trigonometry, spherical geometry, and astronomical calculation methods that wouldn't be formally rediscovered until the Renaissance. But they didn't discover these mathematical principles independently. They inherited them from a tradition that had been developing this knowledge for thousands of years. A tradition that originated in the far north, where the unique conditions of Arctic astronomy had allowed for observations and calculations that were impossible anywhere else on Earth. The Arctic is the only place on Earth where you can observe the full celestial sphere over the course of a year. The long polar nights provide ideal conditions for astronomical observation, while the midnight sun allows for continuous tracking of solar movements. If you wanted to develop advanced astronomy and mathematics, the Arctic would be the perfect laboratory, and that's exactly what the evidence suggests happened. The Hyperborean civilization used their unique geographic position to become master astronomers and mathematicians. They developed technologies and scientific understanding that took advantage of Arctic conditions in ways that seem almost impossible to us now. The crystal lenses discovered in Alaska aren't just precision optical instruments. They're components of a system designed to harness and focus the electromagnetic energy that's abundant in Arctic regions. The aurora borealis isn't just a pretty light show, it's visible evidence of massive electromagnetic forces that an advanced civilization could have learned to tap into. Recent research into the electromagnetic properties of Arctic ice has revealed something extraordinary. Under certain conditions, Arctic ice formations can act as natural semiconductors capable of storing and transmitting electrical energy with remarkable efficiency. The geometric ice formations that occur naturally in the Arctic aren't random. They follow mathematical patterns that suggest the ice itself is responding to electromagnetic fields in ways that could be harnessed by technology we don't fully understand. Dr. Marina Volkov, a physicist specializing in electromagnetic phenomena, has been studying these properties for the past decade. Her research suggests that the unique electromagnetic environment of the Arctic could support technologies based on principles that modern science is only beginning to explore. The Arctic isn't just a frozen wasteland, Dr. Volkov explained. It's an electromagnetic powerhouse. The interaction between cosmic radiation, the Earth's magnetic field, and the crystalline structure of Arctic ice creates conditions that could support energy technologies that we've never imagined. If an ancient civilization had learned to work with these forces, they could have achieved capabilities that would seem magical to us. This might explain the most puzzling aspect of Hyperborean legends. The ancient accounts don't just describe Hyperborea as an advanced civilization. They describe it as a civilization with capabilities that bordered on the supernatural, cities that glowed with their own light, vehicles that could fly without wings, communication systems that allowed instant contact across vast distances, healing technologies that could extend human life far beyond normal limits. Modern science would dismiss these accounts as obvious mythology, but what if they weren't? What if they were accurate descriptions of technologies that we simply don't understand because they operated on principles we haven't discovered yet? The electromagnetic environment of the Arctic could support technologies based on field manipulation, energy transmission through crystalline structures, and information storage in quantum states that would be impossible to maintain in other environments. A civilization that mastered these technologies could indeed have achieved capabilities that would seem magical to less advanced societies, and when that civilization was forced to abandon their Arctic homeland, they would have lost access to the unique conditions that made their most advanced technologies possible. They could have preserved the knowledge, the mathematics, the scientific principles, but the practical application of their most sophisticated technologies would have been lost. This might explain why the megalithic sites built by Hyperborean refugees demonstrate advanced knowledge, but lack the most impressive capabilities described in the legends. They preserved what they could, adapted what they had to work in new environments, but they could never fully recreate what they had achieved in their Arctic homeland. The tragedy of Hyperborea isn't just that an advanced civilization was destroyed, it's that humanity lost access to technologies and scientific understanding that could have accelerated our development by thousands of years. We're only now beginning to rediscover principles that the Hyperboreans had mastered millennia ago. But here's what's even more fascinating. The evidence suggests that not all Hyperborean knowledge was lost. Some of it was preserved, hidden away in secret traditions and mystery schools that maintained fragments of the ancient wisdom across generations. The mystery schools of ancient Egypt, Greece, and Mesopotamia weren't just religious institutions. They were repositories of advanced scientific knowledge that trace back to Hyperborean sources. The geometric principles used in the construction of the Great Pyramid, the astronomical knowledge embedded in Greek mathematics, the metallurgical techniques preserved by ancient smiths, all of these can be traced back to traditions that originated in the far north. Medieval alchemists weren't just trying to turn lead into gold, they were attempting to reconstruct Hyperborean technologies based on fragmentary knowledge passed down through secret traditions. The symbols and diagrams found in alchemical texts aren't mystical nonsense. They're technical specifications for processes that the alchemists no longer fully understood. Renaissance scientists like John Dee, who claimed to communicate with angels through complex mathematical systems, were actually working with corrupted versions of Hyperborean mathematical and communication technologies. The angelic language that Dee recorded bears striking similarities to the linguistic substrates that Professor Volkov identified as remnants of ancient Arctic languages. Even today, there are groups that claim to possess fragments of Hyperborean knowledge. The Theosophical Society, certain Masonic traditions, and various esoteric schools all maintain that they preserve elements of an ancient wisdom tradition that originated in a polar homeland. Most academics dismiss these claims as modern fantasy, but when you examine the technical details preserved in these traditions, you find descriptions of principles and processes that align remarkably well with cutting-edge scientific research. It's as if these groups really do possess fragments of an advanced scientific tradition that they don't fully understand themselves. Dr. Nicholas Roerich, the Russian explorer and mystic who led expeditions across Central Asia in the early 20th century, claimed to have discovered evidence of Hyperborean influence throughout the region. His expeditions uncovered artifacts and sites that demonstrated technologies and knowledge that didn't fit the accepted timeline of human development. Roerich's findings were largely dismissed by mainstream archaeology, but recent re-examination of his notes and artifacts has revealed details that couldn't have been fabricated. Descriptions of metallurgical processes that weren't rediscovered until the 1950s, astronomical calculations that required knowledge of planetary movements that wasn't available in Roerich's time, linguistic analyses that anticipated discoveries in comparative linguistics by decades. The pattern keeps repeating. Researchers who venture too close to Hyperborean evidence find their careers derailed, their funding cut, their findings buried or discredited. It's as if there's a systematic effort to prevent this knowledge from being reconstructed and understood. But why? What could be so threatening about the rediscovery of an ancient Arctic civilization that it requires active suppression? The answer might lie in what that rediscovery would mean for our understanding of human potential and our place in history. If Hyperborea was real, If an advanced civilization existed in the Arctic thousands of years ago, then everything we've been taught about human development is wrong. We're not the pinnacle of human achievement. We're not the first civilization to master advanced technology. We're not even the first to face the challenges of climate change and cosmic catastrophe. We're just the latest in a cycle that has repeated multiple times throughout human history. Civilizations rise, reach incredible heights of achievement, and then fall to natural disasters, cosmic events, or their own hubris. The survivors scatter, preserve what knowledge they can, and slowly rebuild until the cycle begins again. This perspective is profoundly threatening to the modern worldview. It suggests that our technological civilization isn't unique or permanent. It implies that we might not be as advanced as we think we are. It forces us to consider that we might be rediscovering knowledge that was once common, rather than pioneering entirely new frontiers. But it also offers hope. If Hyperborea was real, if they achieved the capabilities described in the legends, then humanity has the potential for achievements far beyond what we currently imagine possible. The technologies they developed, the scientific understanding they possessed, the harmony they achieved with their environment, all of this represents potential futures for our own civilization. The question is whether we can learn from their example and avoid their fate, whether we can rediscover their knowledge without repeating their mistakes, whether we can build a civilization that's not just advanced, but sustainable. And that brings us to the most important question of all. If Hyperborea was real, if remnants of their civilization still exist somewhere in the Arctic, waiting to be discovered, what would that mean for us today? Because the ice is melting. Climate change is revealing things that have been hidden for thousands of years. And if the evidence I've been collecting is accurate, we're on the verge of discoveries that will change everything we think we know about our past, our potential, and our future. The story of Hyperborea isn't just ancient history. It's a roadmap to possibilities we've barely begun to imagine. The archaeological implications of what's happening in the Arctic right now should terrify every government on Earth. Because we're not just talking about finding a few ancient artifacts or discovering some previously unknown settlement. We're talking about the systematic emergence of evidence that proves human civilization has been far more advanced, far longer than anyone in power wants you to believe. And the timing isn't coincidental. Over the past 5 years, as Arctic ice has retreated at unprecedented rates, we've seen an explosion of discoveries that should be making headlines around the world. Instead, they're being classified, buried, or explained away with increasingly desperate attempts at conventional interpretation. In 2022, a joint Canadian-Danish research team working on Ellesmere Island made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Deep beneath layers of permafrost that hadn't thawed in over 10,000 years, they found what can only be described as an ancient industrial complex. We're not talking about crude workshops or primitive tool-making sites. This was sophisticated manufacturing infrastructure, precision-cut stone channels that demonstrate an understanding of fluid dynamics, metallurgical furnaces designed with heat distribution systems that modern engineers struggle to replicate. Most disturbing of all, they found evidence of mass production techniques that shouldn't have existed anywhere on Earth until the Industrial Revolution. Dr. Hansen Eriksson, the team leader, published preliminary findings that described manufacturing processes of unprecedented sophistication for the proposed time period. His follow-up research was classified by the Canadian government 3 months later. When I contacted Dr. Eriksson for comment, his response was brief. "I cannot discuss my findings at this time due to ongoing security reviews. Security reviews for 10,000-year-old manufacturing sites. But the cover-up goes deeper than government classification. It extends into the very institutions we trust to preserve and interpret our past. Major museums are refusing to display artifacts that don't fit the accepted timeline. Academic journals are rejecting papers that present evidence of advanced prehistoric technology. Researchers who persist in studying these anomalies find themselves professionally isolated, their careers quietly destroyed." Dr. Sarah Chen, formerly of the Smithsonian Institution, experienced this firsthand when she attempted to publish research on electromagnetic anomalies detected at Arctic sites. Her paper documented evidence of ancient electromagnetic manipulation on a scale that implied technologies far beyond anything in the conventional archaeological record. The institutional response was immediate and coordinated, Dr. Chen told me during a phone interview she requested remain off the record until now. My research was labelled speculative and potentially damaging to public understanding of archaeological science. I was essentially blacklisted from mainstream archaeology for asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Dr. Chen now works independently, funding her research through private donors who prefer to remain anonymous. Her latest findings, based on satellite analysis of electromagnetic signatures across the Arctic, suggest that there are dozens of buried sites that demonstrate the same technological anomalies, sites that remain untouched because no one wants to deal with the implications of what they might contain. The electromagnetic evidence is particularly compelling because it can't be dismissed as misidentification or wishful thinking. These are measurable, quantifiable signatures that indicate the presence of structured electromagnetic fields in locations where such fields shouldn't exist naturally. Modern technology can detect these signatures, but we can't explain them. The electromagnetic patterns are too complex, too organized, too obviously artificial to be natural phenomena. They suggest the presence of buried structures that were designed to generate, focus, and manipulate electromagnetic energy using principles that modern science is only beginning to understand. But here's what's truly disturbing. When you map these electromagnetic anomalies across the Arctic and compare them to the locations described in ancient accounts of Hyperborea, the correlation is almost perfect. It's as if the Greek and Roman historians were working from accurate maps of electromagnetic sites that we're only now developing the technology to detect. The implications are staggering. Either the ancients possessed electromagnetic detection technology that we don't know about, or they had direct knowledge of these sites from a civilization that understood electromagnetic principles thousands of years before we supposedly discovered them. Recent advances in ground-penetrating radar have revealed even more disturbing evidence. In 2023, a private research team using military-grade scanning equipment detected what appears to be a vast underground network connecting sites across the Arctic. Not natural cave systems, but precisely engineered tunnels that maintain consistent dimensions across hundreds of miles. The tunnel network appears to follow geometric patterns that optimize electromagnetic transmission. The engineering principles demonstrated in the construction suggest knowledge of quantum field effects that wasn't formally theorized until the 21st century. Whoever built these tunnels understood physics at a level that we've only recently achieved ourselves. Dr. Marcus Webb, a quantum physicist who consulted on the project, described the tunnel network as impossible according to our current understanding of prehistoric capabilities. The precision required, the knowledge of electromagnetic principles, the sheer scale of the engineering project implies a level of technological sophistication that challenges everything we believe about ancient civilizations. But the most disturbing discovery came when the research team attempted to map the full extent of the tunnel network. The passages don't end at the Arctic. They extend south, connecting to sites across North America, Europe, and Asia. Sites that have been identified as sacred locations, ancient monuments, and places of power for thousands of years. Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, Machu Picchu, Easter Island. All of these sites show electromagnetic signatures consistent with connection to the Arctic tunnel network, as if the entire planet was once connected by a sophisticated communication and transportation system that we've completely forgotten about. The technology required to construct and maintain such a network would have demanded resources and coordination on a global scale. This wasn't the work of isolated tribes or primitive civilizations. This was planetary engineering undertaken by a society with capabilities that matched or exceeded our own. And all of it traces back to the Arctic, to locations that match the descriptions of Hyperborea found in ancient texts, to sites that are now being revealed as the ice melts and the permafrost thaws. But the melting ice isn't just revealing archaeological sites, it's revealing technology, actual functional technology that shouldn't exist but demonstrably does. In 2023, a team of geologists working for a private mining company in northern Alaska made a discovery that they initially kept secret for 6 months. Embedded in melting permafrost, they found what appeared to be metallic objects with properties that defied conventional materials science. The objects were clearly manufactured, showing precision tooling marks and assembly techniques that indicated advanced engineering. But materials analysis revealed compositions that don't match any known alloys. The metallic structures contained elements arranged in configurations that shouldn't be stable according to our understanding of atomic physics, yet remained perfectly intact after thousands of years of burial. When subjected to electromagnetic testing, the objects demonstrated properties that modern technology can barely replicate. They could store and transmit electrical energy with near-perfect efficiency. They responded to specific frequencies in ways that suggested they were components of a larger technological system. Most remarkably, they seemed to be self-repairing, with microscopic structures that could reorganize themselves when damaged. Dr. Angela Morrison, a material scientist who examined the objects, described them as technology that appears to be based on principles we haven't discovered yet. The precision of the atomic-level engineering, the stability of impossible molecular configurations, the functionality of systems that we can observe but not understand, all point to a technological tradition that was far more advanced than anything in our current scientific arsenal. The mining company attempted to study the objects further, but they were seized by federal authorities under provisions of the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. The official explanation was that the objects were culturally significant artifacts requiring specialized preservation. The reality is that they represent technology that could revolutionize our understanding of physics, materials science, and engineering. Similar objects are being discovered across the Arctic as the ice continues to melt. Each discovery is more impossible than the last. Each piece of evidence points toward the same conclusion, that we're not the first technological civilization to inhabit this planet, and we're certainly not the most advanced. The pattern of official suppression is becoming impossible to ignore. Every major discovery is classified, confiscated, or explained away. Researchers are being silenced. Evidence is being hidden. And the public is being systematically prevented from learning about discoveries that could transform our understanding of human potential and our place in history. But why the cover-up? What could be so threatening about ancient technology that it requires active suppression by multiple governments and institutions? The answer lies in what this technology represents. If Hyperborean artifacts demonstrate capabilities that exceed our current science, it means our technological civilization isn't the pinnacle of human achievement. We're not the masters of the universe we believe ourselves to be. We're students, still learning principles that others mastered thousands of years ago. This realization would shatter the foundations of modern society. Our economic systems, our political structures, our entire worldview is built on the assumption that we represent the height of human development. If that assumption is wrong, if we're actually recovering from a previous collapse rather than pioneering new frontiers, then everything we believe about progress, civilization, and human potential needs to be reconsidered. The implications extend far beyond academia and into the realm of global power structures. If advanced technology existed in the past and was lost, it means that technological advancement isn't inevitable or permanent. Civilizations can fall, knowledge can be lost. What we consider permanent progress might be temporary recovery. This perspective is profoundly threatening to those who benefit from the current system. If people understood that our technological civilization is fragile, that it could collapse just as previous civilizations collapsed, they might start asking uncomfortable questions about sustainability, resource allocation, and long-term planning. They might start demanding that we learn from the mistakes of the past rather than repeating them. They might insist on technologies and social systems that are designed for survival rather than short-term profit. They might refuse to accept that our current path is the only possible future. The Hyperborean evidence suggests that previous civilizations achieved remarkable harmony between advanced technology and environmental sustainability. The archaeological sites show no evidence of environmental destruction or resource depletion. The technology appears to have been designed to work with natural systems rather than against them. If we could understand and adapt these principles, we could potentially solve many of the crises facing our current civilization. Climate change, resource depletion, environmental destruction, all of these problems might have solutions that were discovered and implemented thousands of years ago. But accessing this knowledge would require admitting that our ancestors were more advanced than we are. It would mean acknowledging that our current approach to technology and civilization might be fundamentally flawed. It would force us to question assumptions that form the foundation of modern society, and that's exactly what those in power don't want to happen. The cover-up of Hyperborean evidence isn't just about hiding the past, it's about controlling the future. By preventing us from learning about previous achievements, they're limiting our understanding of what's possible. By suppressing evidence of ancient technology, they're ensuring that we remain dependent on current systems and current power structures. But the evidence keeps emerging, the ice keeps melting, and despite the efforts to suppress and classify these discoveries, information continues to leak out. Researchers continue to investigate, and slowly, inevitably, the truth about Hyperborea and what it means for our future is coming to light. The question is whether we'll be ready to accept what that truth reveals about ourselves, our past, and our potential. Because if the evidence is accurate, if Hyperborea was real, and their technology was as advanced as it appears, then we're standing on the threshold of discoveries that could transform human civilization in ways we can barely imagine. But transformation requires acknowledging that our current path isn't the only possible one. It requires accepting that others came before us and achieved things we're still struggling to understand. It requires the humility to learn from the past rather than assuming we've surpassed it. And most importantly, it requires the courage to ask questions that challenge everything we've been taught about who we are and where we're going. The story of Hyperborea is still being written. Every melting glacier reveals new chapters. Every classified discovery adds new evidence. Every suppressed researcher brings us closer to understanding what really happened in the Arctic thousands of years ago. But the most important chapter hasn't been written yet. That's the chapter about what we do with this knowledge once we fully understand it. Whether we use it to build a better future, or whether we repeat the mistakes that caused Hyperborea to fall in the first place. The choice, as always, is ours to make, but we can only make it if we have all the information. And right now, that information is being systematically hidden from us by people who benefit from keeping us ignorant about our own potential. The ice is melting, the truth is emerging, and despite all efforts to suppress it, the legacy of Hyperborea is finally being revealed. The question is whether we're brave enough to face what it tells us about ourselves. But here's where the story takes a turn that should make your blood run cold. Because the evidence suggests that we're not just dealing with accidental discoveries being covered up by nervous governments. We're dealing with active excavation projects that have been running in secret for decades, extracting Hyperborean technology while keeping the public completely in the dark about what's being found. In 1983, satellite imagery captured something extraordinary in the Canadian Arctic. Geometric patterns beneath the ice that were clearly artificial, stretching across areas larger than major metropolitan cities. The images were classified immediately, but not before independent researchers managed to obtain copies through channels that officially don't exist. Dr. Michael Thornton, a former NASA satellite analyst who requested anonymity for this interview, described what he saw in those images as urban planning on a scale that dwarfs anything in human history. The geometric patterns weren't random. They followed mathematical principles that optimize for electromagnetic flow, thermal regulation, and what appeared to be atmospheric processing on a massive scale. We're talking about city-sized installations that were designed as integrated technological systems, Dr. Thornton explained. Not collections of buildings, but single massive machines built to interact with planetary forces in ways we don't understand. The engineering knowledge required to design and construct something like this would make our most advanced architects look like children playing with blocks. But here's what's truly disturbing. Within 2 years of those satellite images being captured, construction equipment began appearing at those Arctic locations. Not archaeological excavation equipment, mining and extraction equipment, heavy industrial machinery designed to remove large quantities of material quickly and efficiently. The official explanation, when any explanation was given at all, was that these were mineral extraction operations. Private companies had identified valuable ore deposits and received permits for mining operations. Nothing unusual, nothing to see here, except the companies involved were shell corporations with no history of mining operations. The equipment was being transported by military contractors, and the extracted materials were being shipped to research facilities that officially don't exist on any government organizational charts. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a former employee of one of these facilities, came forward in 2019 with information that she claims proves the existence of a systematic program to reverse engineer Hyperborean technology. Her security clearance was revoked before she could present her evidence publicly, and she's been under federal investigation ever since. What I saw wasn't archaeology, Dr. Martinez told me during a secure phone conversation. It was industrial espionage on a scale that spans millennia. We weren't studying ancient artifacts. We were taking apart functional technology and trying to figure out how to rebuild it for modern applications. According to Dr. Martinez, the extracted Hyperborean artifacts demonstrated capabilities that are decades ahead of our current technology. Energy storage systems that could hold massive amounts of power in objects the size of smartphones. Communication devices that could transmit information instantly across any distance without requiring traditional infrastructure. Materials that could change their properties on command. becoming harder than diamond or softer than silk as needed. But the most remarkable discovery, according to her account, was what she called consciousness-responsive technology. Hyperborean devices that seem to interface directly with human thought and intention, operating not through mechanical controls but through some form of psychic connection that modern science has no framework to explain. The devices would respond to the user's mental state, Dr. Martinez explained. Not just simple on-off commands, but complex intentions and emotional states. It was as if the technology was designed to work with consciousness itself as an operating system. We spent years trying to understand the interface mechanisms, but we never came close to replicating the effect. This consciousness-responsive technology might explain one of the most puzzling aspects of Hyperborean legends. Ancient accounts consistently describe Hyperborean technology as being operated not by skilled technicians, but by individuals with special spiritual or mental preparation. The Greek texts speak of priests who could activate sacred devices through prayer and meditation. Celtic legends describe druids who could communicate with crystalline structures through pure intention. Modern science dismisses these accounts as primitive misunderstanding of mechanical processes. But what if they were accurate descriptions of technology that operated through principles we haven't discovered yet? What if consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex brains, but an actual force that can interface with properly designed technological systems? Recent research in quantum consciousness and quantum field theory suggests that this might not be as impossible as it sounds. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that consciousness can have measurable effects on physical systems at the subatomic level. If Hyperborean technology was designed to operate through quantum field manipulation, it could theoretically respond to conscious intention in ways that would seem magical to observers who didn't understand the underlying principles. Dr. Stuart Hameroff, a researcher at the University of Arizona who studies quantum consciousness, has proposed that consciousness might operate through quantum processes in microtubules within brain cells. If this theory is correct, then consciousness could potentially interface with quantum-based technology in ways that would allow direct mental control of properly designed devices. The idea of consciousness-responsive technology isn't science fiction, Dr. Hameroff explained during our interview. It's a logical extension of quantum mechanics applied to consciousness research. If consciousness operates through quantum processes, then quantum-based technology could theoretically be designed to respond to conscious intention. We're probably decades away from developing such technology ourselves, but there's no reason it couldn't have been developed by a previous civilization with a different approach to scientific research. This raises a terrifying possibility. If the secret excavation projects have recovered functional consciousness-responsive technology, and if they've learned how to operate it, then we're not just talking about advanced devices. We're talking about technology that could potentially be used to influence human consciousness itself. Dr. Martinez hinted at this possibility during our conversation, though she was reluctant to provide specific details. Some of the devices we recovered seemed to work in reverse, she said. Instead of responding to consciousness, they appeared to influence it. We found artifacts that could induce specific emotional states, enhance cognitive function, or even implant information directly into the user's mind. The applications were both fascinating and terrifying. The implications of consciousness-influencing technology are staggering. If such devices exist and are being studied by secret government programs, they could represent the ultimate tool for social control. Technology that could literally program human thoughts and emotions would make traditional propaganda and manipulation techniques look primitive by comparison. But it gets worse, because the evidence suggests that this technology isn't just being studied, it's being tested. Over the past decade, there have been increasing reports of unusual psychological phenomena in communities near suspected Hyperborean excavation sites. Residents describing vivid shared dreams, sudden changes in personality, and inexplicable knowledge of subjects they never studied. Local hospitals reporting spikes in neurological symptoms that don't match any known medical conditions. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a neurologist working in northern Canada, has documented dozens of cases involving patients who live near suspected excavation sites. Her patients describe symptoms that include enhanced cognitive abilities, telepathic experiences, and access to information that they couldn't have acquired through normal means. The neurological patterns I'm seeing don't match anything in medical literature, Dr. Walsh explained. These patients show increased activity in brain regions associated with consciousness and perception, But the activation patterns are unlike anything we see in normal human neurology. It's as if their brains are being influenced by some external source that's enhancing certain cognitive functions while creating others we don't understand. Most disturbing of all, many of these patients report receiving information about ancient civilizations, advanced technology, and scientific principles that they had no previous knowledge of. Information that, when checked against archaeological and scientific literature, proves to be remarkably accurate. It's as if proximity to Hyperborean technology is somehow activating dormant areas of human consciousness, providing access to information that's been encoded in human genetic memory for thousands of years. Or alternatively, the technology itself is transmitting information directly into the minds of nearby individuals. Either possibility has profound implications for our understanding of human consciousness and our connection to ancient civilizations. If Hyperborean technology can activate genetic memories or transmit information telepathically, then the line between past and present, between ancient knowledge and modern discovery, becomes much more blurred than we ever imagined. But here's what's most troubling about all of this. The secret programs studying Hyperborean technology aren't sharing their discoveries with the scientific community or the public. They're keeping everything classified while using the recovered technology for purposes that remain completely opaque to outside observers. Dr. Martinez believes that the ultimate goal of these programs is to weaponize Hyperborean technology for military and intelligence applications. Consciousness-responsive devices could be used to enhance soldier performance or extract information from prisoners. Consciousness-influencing technology could be used to control populations or eliminate dissent. Energy storage and transmission systems could power weapons with capabilities that exceed anything in current military arsenals. The technology we recovered represented power on a scale that could reshape global civilization, Dr. Martinez said. But instead of using it to solve humanity's problems, the people controlling these programs see it as an opportunity to consolidate control and maintain their dominance over the rest of us. They're treating Hyperborean technology as a tool for oppression rather than liberation. This pattern of suppression and weaponization extends beyond just the technology itself. It includes active efforts to prevent independent researchers from making their own discoveries and sharing them with the public. Dr. James Kellerman, an independent archaeologist who's been investigating Hyperborean sites for over a decade, has experienced systematic harassment and intimidation that escalated dramatically after he began publishing his findings online. His research permits have been revoked, his funding sources have been cut off, and he's been subjected to legal challenges that have drained his resources and limited his ability to continue his work. The message is clear, Dr. Kellerman told me during our interview. They want to maintain a monopoly on Hyperborean research. Anyone who tries to study these sites independently or share information publicly becomes a target for systematic harassment designed to destroy their credibility and their ability to continue working. But the harassment goes beyond just professional sabotage. Dr. Kellerman and other independent researchers report surveillance, break-ins, and intimidation tactics that seem designed to create fear and discourage further investigation. It's as if there's a coordinated effort to ensure that Hyperborean technology remains under the exclusive control of whatever organizations are running the secret excavation programs. The scope of this suppression suggests that we're not dealing with a single government agency or research institution. This appears to be a coordinated international effort involving multiple governments, military organizations, and private corporations, all working together to keep Hyperborean discoveries secret while exploiting them for their own purposes. And that coordination raises the most disturbing question of all. If these organizations are working together to suppress and weaponize Hyperborean technology, what does that say about their ultimate goals for human civilization? So here we are, standing at the edge of the greatest mystery in human history. The ice is melting, the truth is emerging, and despite every effort to bury it, the legacy of Hyperborea refuses to stay hidden. We've seen the evidence, followed the cover-ups, and witnessed the systematic suppression of discoveries that could transform everything we think we know about our past and our future. But the most important question isn't what Hyperborea was, it's what we're going to do with the knowledge that it existed. The choice is ours, but only if we're brave enough to demand the truth they've been hiding from us.